This presentation is about 6 distinguished individuals inducted into the American Association of Drilling Engineers, Fluids Hall of Fame, Class of 2014. The Hall of Fame was established by the AADE Houston chapter in 2005, to recognize and preserve the legacies of key individuals who have contributed to the advancement of oilfield fluids technology. In doing so, it seeks to elevate the images of the different fluid segments in the oil and gas industry, by highlighting contributions of its distinguished men and women. In 2014, the Fluids Hall of Fame was officially opened to individuals representing completion, cementing, and fracturing fluids. The class of 2014 includes the following extraordinary individuals, in alphabetical order. Syed A. Ali, inducted for his significant contributions to the advancement of completion fluids technology. Thomas S. Carter, honored for his application of drilling fluids technologies to achieve quality well bores in critical wells. James D. Fan, inducted for his pioneering contributions to the development of equipment for measuring fluid properties. James Berger, accepted from Mr. Fan, who passed away in 2002. Earl P. Halliburton, inducted for his pioneering developments in cementing technology. Grandson Earl P. Halliburton III and great-granddaughter Stephanie, accepted for Mr. Halliburton, who passed away in 1957. John Kelly, Jr., honored for his significant contributions to the technology of oil-based drilling fluids. Jeffrey Kelly, accepted for his father, who passed away in 2013. And Benjamin K. Stroud, inducted for his pioneering developments of weighting agents for controlling downhole pressures. Charles Miller, accepted for Mr. Stroud, who passed away in 1950. Honorees in 4 previous biennial classes include the class of 2006, the class of 2008, the class of 2010, and the class of 2012. These are the AADE Fluids Hall of Famers and their families, who attended their April 15, 2014 reunion.
The philosophy I have is win-win philosophy. I treat vendors and suppliers as partners. So we work together and as a common goal to solve the field problems. So our relationship always been as a team effort. One of my passions is to help the field people solve field problems. And so that's, my career was centered around developing techniques, solutions for the field.
During my career, I've had many different assignments and different tasks, but one of the things that I really enjoyed the most was trying to develop new techniques and new processes and so forth, learning how to estimate pore pressure, learning how to design the well, selecting the right fluid to apply.
Jimmy was quite an inventor. He's got more than 100 patents to his name. One of his early patents was for the concentric cylinder viscometer, which a lot of people in this drilling fluids industry are very familiar with.
He would be the first to tell you that his inventiveness was able to be brought to fruition and turned to product because of the team that worked with him. Again, he's a little bit like a Thomas Edison, where it's a lot of trial and error for him if you don't have the formal engineering.
At Mobil, he worked in not only oil muds, he worked in wellbore stability and did a lot of other things too. In fact, one of his well-respected papers was on pore pressure frac gradient. He also was asked by SPE to write a distinguished author paper in JPT, and he not only covered drilling fluids, but he also covered bits and other areas.
Ben Stroud saw that you could use this barium sulfate mineral with a specific gravity of about 4 times that of water. You could put it in water. Of course, it would tend to settle. But then he also found out that there was a company that sold clays for various purposes, like ceramics and others. And he also recognized that they were using suspending materials in paints. And all of this kind of went together and formulated the weighted water-based muds. So what he did was absolutely essential to what we do today.
In middle western Tennessee, his formal education actually ended to help his mother, and between the two of them, help the rest of the family survive. Earlier in his first few years, he had had double pneumonia twice. So he was actually rather diminutive in size, but being so small in stature, he was bullied a lot. And a lot of that was his motivation. So in this case, bullying pushed him to be actually excel in everything he did and be motivated to achieve.
I was born in India and moved to Pakistan when I was 8 years old during 1948 separation. And I grew up in Karachi, Pakistan, and went to school in University of Karachi and got my bachelor's and master's. And right after my bachelor's, I started working for Pakistani Geological Survey. And I met a very wonderful American who I was assigned to, and he felt, I guess he liked me very much. He said, "Would you like to come to the United States?" And he sponsored me, and I went to Ohio State and I got my master's. So I have 2 masters, and then I went on to get a PhD at Rensselaer Polytechnic Institute. And my mentor suggested that I'm going to find research an uphill battle because I do not have skills or a very niche interest in research. So he said, "I have looked at your background, you have a skills and you have a training, you'll be more suited for oil and gas industry."
Jimmy Phan's early life was spent most of the time in West Texas. He was born in 1913. He finished his education through the 8th grade and then decided to move on with his life. And he had some experience as a younger child in doing some blacksmith work. So he learned to do the kind of iron work that's involved in blacksmithing. So that helped him get a job in Houston with a company doing some ornamental ironworks.
Born in Shreveport, Louisiana, and graduated from Centenary College in 1963. I had originally started roughnecking in '59. I joined Baroid and went to work in South Louisiana. From there, then I was made district engineer in Morgan City, and in 1970 I went to New Orleans as area engineer for the eastern region of the Louisiana business unit. In 1973, I was moved to London to be operation manager for the North Sea. From there, I was moved as affiliate manager in 1976 to Iran. And from there, then, I was moved back to be the first worldwide manager in Houston of Baroid Logging Systems. And that's when we brought out the very first computer-based mud logging unit.
World War I comes along, and he went ahead, signed up for the government, got into the Navy, being stuck way down in the bowels of this Navy ship in the engine room, that all of a sudden you had volumes, temperatures, and pressures. The library on board the ship, they did have the Navy regs, and they had the Constitution, they had the Bill of Rights, and a few books on American history. I think this is where his conservative approach to politics and business came together. After the Navy, he ends up in California working for a Perkins company in California. And this is kind of famous around the Halliburton company and the family, but he always used to say that the best 2 things that ever happened to me in life was that Perkins hired me and then Perkins fired me. From there, the Skelly family and what have you, and the one well that allowed him to start and such his business. And, you know, a lot of that, it then becomes corporate history from there on.
his education was only through the 8th grade. But after that, he did a lot of additional studies. When he got to the city of Houston, he took courses at the University of Houston. He took some correspondence courses, a lot in mechanical engineering, took some law courses at night. It really became much of a self-educated individual.
John Kelly was born in Idaho in 1924, served in the military, and then went back to Idaho to get his bachelor's degree. John had a master's degree from the University of Chicago and a PhD from Stanford University, but he never bragged about those kind of things. He just wasn't that kind of guy. And then he went to work for Mobil Oil for 28 years.
I switched over to Conoco in 1980 and worked in the headquarters division drilling staff. I stayed in that group until I retired in 1997 and joined Newpark was being started up again, so I went up there to help organize the R&D and the laboratories. I retired from that and then joined Tetra and then retired again in 2006 when Gary Massey with the Drilling Training Alliance called and asked me to come join over there for that training. And I've been there more or less ever since.
So he worked for Brown Geophysical Seismograph Company, became very good at what he was doing, decided to go into business for himself. So he started Geophysical Machine Works. And in doing that, he was doing basically the same thing, repairing seismograph equipment. And then it was during that period of time that he started seeing the need for other types of measurement equipment in the oil industry. So he started experimenting with viscometers and different types of equipment, eventually building up a good business in drilling fluids testing equipment.
My intention was not to do oil field. I was not interested in oil field. What I was interested in the basic research in sedimentology because I'm a geologist by training. While I was doing my postdoc at Woods Hole, I met Dr. Hollis Hedberg, who was a very renowned scientist for Gulf oil. And I approached him. And I just reached out to him. I said, I'm desperate. I need a job. And that's why I ended up with the Gulf Oil Research and Development Company. Then my first year was very difficult, extremely difficult, because I didn't have the skill set or the training to do the daily job, correlating logs, drawing maps. As a result, my supervisor came to me and said, look, you're having a tough time. I suggest you sit down, think about it, find yourself a niche where you can excel, be productive, and be happy. So I sat there, and a colleague of mine came to me and said, look, I looked at your resume. You have a strong background in geology, and you have a background in chemistry. How about if you go into the production chemistry? So I thought about it. I said, okay, sounds good. And that's the start of my career. I made a fun out of it. I made a career out of it. I'm having a lot of fun.
There wasn't a lot of history about drilling fluids and the people who were involved in the development of drilling fluids. And finally, in 2005, I made a suggestion at one of the steering committee meetings, and Mario thought it was a great idea, and we sort of began to collaborate on this. We look for people who have made first contributions to the industry, and we then gather them together every other year at the National Technical Fluids Conference that the AADE sponsors, and we induct them in a ceremony. began to pick people, not so much for the development of industries. We're not looking at industry captains, but we're looking at the unsung heroes, the people who basically came up with new ideas and new ways to do things. This year we're inducting Earl P. Halliburton. Many people don't realize that he is a holder of 38 patents on cement and downhole tools in order to pump cement.
Well, this year, whenever you're opening up the Drilling Fluids Hall of Fame into being a Fluids Hall of Fame, obviously it makes a lot of sense. I mean, none of these things operate independently of one another.
First, I'm delighted that the AADE is expanding the Drilling Fluids Hall of Fame to cover all the fluids, because the induction of people from cementing and from completion fluids is a big step. Should have been recognized long ago.
Well, I think opening the Hall of Fame to other aspects of the drilling fluid is a thing to do, because there's things that have been done there that are certainly just as valuable as they have in the fluids end of it. So I'm certainly in agreement to do it. I think it's a good step in the right direction.
I think that the AADE and Dennis Goldwood and Mario Zamora and the various ones who've helped to get this Hall of Fame together are to be congratulated, and I thank them very much personally.
He wanted to live in the Southwest. He was, a Texan, Oklahoman, Californian. This was his part of the world. He felt it was kind of, a little bit of the old cowboy. He would be, I would say, if one drew a comparison, maybe a Ronald Reagan type individual in many respects.
John worked for Mobile Research Laboratories under different names, but it was basically the Mobile Research Labs. And for 28 years, he started in Duncanville and he stayed in Duncanville the whole time. He traveled internationally for Mobile and was very well respected by not only Mobile people, but other people in the industry.
I was named ADT engineer, which was the very first attempt to do on-site pore pressure prediction. And I was the first engineer in the Gulf to go out and do that with a slide rule and a 3-pin Martin Decker recorder in 1966. And actually the first well was Amarada Hess, and Dan Boone liked the results of what we were able to provide, and he eventually, of course, started the Analyst.
And then I moved to Pittsburgh in the research, and then I came to New Orleans, and from New Orleans back to Houston, and in 2007 I retired and got bored, decided to work with Schlumberger. So I with Schlumberger since 2007.
When he got an idea for an invention, a piece of equipment, an instrument, and regardless of what it was, yeah, he then became obsessed with making it, carrying it out to its fullest until he was finally reached the point where he felt like he had done all that he could for that. And one thing that he did do when he reached that point, when he felt like he had the invention that he wanted, he would then put closure on it. And as I said before, then he would file for a patent on that particular device.
During the initial completion, we lost 600 barrels of 13 ppg calcium bromide to the formation. And we did the acid job, did the growl pack, the well didn't come in. 4 acid job altogether on the wells. Still the results were not satisfactory, nothing coming out. God behold, we realized that calcium bromide was incompatible with the crude oil and formed a very tenacious emulsion. After realizing this, we tried to convince everybody that the brines can cause emulsion issue, which can hurt the production or damage the reservoir. Nobody believed us. So we came up with emulsion preventer technology, which is friendly with your brine, is still compatible. That is the whole, Foxenberg and I introduced this concept in the industry.
John was very good about getting equipment for the new laboratory before we moved there. We had a flow loop at the old laboratory, but we didn't want to move that, so we had a new one built outside, and it worked really, really well. It had not only flow loop capabilities, but also dynamic filtration capabilities, which was unusual. So that was worthwhile. We also had a high temperature, high pressure visual cell we could use for shales and things like that. And we had a LEM, Literacy Evaluation Monitor, very similar to what MI SWACO had.
We had 18 rigs running out of Lake Charles, and the drilling manager there was very interested in doing something to help the environmental situation. So he actually started to use Coastal Spot, which was the Mentor 28 base, but every time we got above 13 pounds per gallon, we lost returns. So the issue was that the material was very good, but it only worked in very low densities because of the viscosity. So I got with Don Whitfield, and he established a project up in Ponca City, and we started looking for part of the refinery stream that would meet lower viscosity type criteria and be a little less toxic than some of the other materials. So that's essentially how that project got started, and he, along with Phil Boyd, identified a stream out of the refinery.
John had an article in Oil and Gas Journal also about a pipe loop which he had designed at Mobil, and they would test it high temperature, high pressures. It was actually for lignosulfonate muds, so people think it has to be in oil muds, but he had done other work also. One of the interesting things was, when I got there, is that they were working on a project for briquetting cuttings, basically taking the cuttings, grinding them up, exposing the surface area so the oil will be absorbed on the surface, then making them into charcoal briquettes. And this would then reduce the surface area exposed to the water, and they could be dumped overboard. About the same time, something called mineral oil muds came in, so the project was shut down. John actually had several patents in the area of briquetting, making pellets for the cuttings, and they were issued by the U.S. Patent Office. Yeah, I think he had 6 patents overall, and they were very different areas, all of them.
Jimmy Fan sold his company, Fan Instrument Corporation, to Hock Chemical. Hock Chemical then eventually sold that same business to Dresser Magabar, and then eventually in 1985, Bayreuth Corporation purchased the Fan Instrument operations from Dresser Magabar, and thus was formed this company that we know today as Fan Instrument Company.
Chevron had a brand new deep water field called Genesis, and we were doing the frac packing on Genesis. And my manager came to me and asked me that if you're going to do the frac pack, right after the frac pack, we have to control the fluid loss, and I'm going to spot the fluid loss pill. Mark Leister, who was with MI SWACO, and I worked and worked and worked, developed a pill which will control the fluid loss. When I'm done, will come off the screen. So that's called seal and peels.
John worked not only in research but also in tech service, so he had the capability for doing both areas. At Mobil at one time, they had research separate from tech service. Eventually put it back together again, but John worked in both areas previously, and he was good in both areas.
A lot of people in this industry are familiar with what he did in the drilling fluids industry with viscometers and consistometers and so forth, but he also had patents to other areas outside of the drilling fluids industry, and that is he has a patent on a tab that was used on the old style floppy disk for computers, so that you could seal that or make that disk, that floppy disk, where it was not erasable or couldn't be written over. He has a patent on that. He also has a patent on an automatic water or feed dispenser for cattle, used in the cattle industry, and even for medication for cows.
One day, there in the Bakersfield, Kern oil field area, he took his son after he'd finished his work late in the afternoon, and they went to a soda fountain. The straws for the malts, like kind of in 7-Eleven stores today for Slurpees, are a different diameter. They're a larger diameter than your normal soda straw. Like a lot of kids, I guess, to bring attention back to themselves, started doing the old Slurpee noisy part of the straw on the bottom of the malt. And if Granddad had just turned and said, cut that out, Halliburton wouldn't exist. What happened is he glanced over, and Dad had been playing not only with his own straw, but the other straw, and they put one inside the other, and was sucking the last or blowing some of the, making a lot of noise and what have you. But the concept of the very thin, tall malt glass with the two straws, and the one and the other was an aha moment. He grabbed his son, they went back to the garage in the back where he tinkered for the next 3 or 4 days, ran to Perkins and said, I've been doing a lot of research and trying to come up with some better ways to do things, and I think I've come up with a couple ideas that may really help. Perkins told him, he said, we need you to be out in the fields and doing the work. We know already what we need to do, and we've got it taken care of. If you're going to be an inventor, you need to probably find another way to go in life.
That was in 1993. I was selected to talk about, one of the issues was downhole disposal of creating slurries out of the cuttings and using part of the mud and so forth to be a carrier for the fluid and just inject it down the wells.
And he tells a story about one year when there was a freeze coming through the city of Houston, and so he knew that a lot of the citizens did not have the keys to turn off their water, and so he went and bought a whole bunch of iron rods, and he tied them underneath his car, took them to this company called Ornamental Iron Works, and made keys so that people could turn off their water systems before it froze.
Yeah, John Kelly and I worked together on the API Committee 13, and he was really kind of Mr. Oil-based mud at the time that he was on there, and also Bayrite. He was very, very active in the Bayrite area.
John was a superb gentleman. He was very, very willing to ask your opinion, and then he listened to what you had to say.
One of the first things I realized was that John let people do what they should do. He was a good manager also. He helped you, he encouraged you, but he didn't control you. He taught you how to think, how to work, how to attack things.
The thing about John is he was undaunted. He and Will Roper have an early patent on free and stuck pipe, but most of the others that John had authored, these had to do with various ways of handling oil mud cuttings and disposal of them offshore.
John Kelly was really a fantastic guy. He was really well respected by everyone in the industry. He had done a lot for his industry, for mobile, for the family, for the church, and everything else. I used to walk around the football track with him at lunchtime every day, and he never bragged about anything. He was very, very humble, very, very honest, and very, very pleasant.
Really owe a great debt of gratitude to Jimmy Fan first for his building and manufacture of the Kuwait hatch-check viscocylinder, the concentric cylinder that is used now worldwide.
Jimmy Fan was a person that you could talk to, and he would tell you the straight story. His instruments, of course, the Fan 35 at that time was standard. Everybody used it. It's an interesting design. And I'm so glad he's in the Hall of Fame, because the contributions that Fan Instruments made in those early days, well, they were just essential.
Not only was he smart, he was a fine gentleman, but he did more to make measurements for drilling fluid more than anybody else. I was really lucky to work with him on one early project. I didn't do the work, but I just did some evaluation for him with his first 2-speed fan.
Jimmy made a gigantic leap forward with our solids control measurements. He's mostly recognized for his rheology, but that 50cc retort has made much, much better accuracy in the field.
He would embrace the technology we have today, because that's the kind of person he was. It didn't matter to him. He would learn. He would teach himself. He would read, find out everything he could about it. He absolutely would.
Fan is one of those, in our business, is one of the everyday words. So whenever you take a person like Jimmy Fan that was able to see a way to do a better job of testing drilling fluids, well, then he affected the industry, throughout, even up today, and still on. So the things that he did were very much in line with some of the things, say, over in the cementing area, that Mr. Halliburton or O.P. Halliburton did. So these were guys that were very far-sighted, very innovative. They started businesses that remain today, and so they're the sort of people that really changed things and made things better as far as our technology was concerned.
One of the interesting things about Ben Stroud was that he, saw the value in this particular material in being able, because they were having problems on some of the wells up in North Louisiana with pressure. The benefit is that now we had a material that was essentially benign. If it was ground to the right particle size distribution, you could make a slurry that then you could pump. And that was very important with being able to drill deeper and deeper, because as time went on, we obviously went deeper and deeper in our wells. He did a great service for the industry, and he was really kind of a champion for that, because there weren't a lot of people who really were convinced at the time that he was doing a lot of, he published things in the state documents about the mud weight schedule and how to create the right pressure.
Well, without barite, we might not have an industry. The discovery of the abilities of it as a mineral got us away from the fact that whenever you discovered oil in a reservoir, you discovered it by it going up over the top of the derrick.
A lot of mentoring was done for me. A lot of training was done for me. And I feel like that it's only right that I try to give something back. And the way that I can do that is try to share my experience and what I've learned with the young people coming along.
The people who have influenced my career, the first was Dr. Hollis Hedberg, who got me the break in the industry. And then Grant Steele, who was with Gulf, who gave me all the support and encouragement while I was struggling trying to fit in the oil industry. So those are the two people I give the greatest credit. And then third one is Bill Allman, who's now with Chevron. He used to be with Texaco. He got me started and gave me a lot of encouragement and pointers how to use the production chemistry, or how to use the chemistry in the production application. So these three people have a tremendous influence on my career.
The first time that I ever had interface with Jay Simpson, I had started, had an interest in rheology and so forth, so I started calculating pressure drops and N numbers and things like that, and that was picked up by Jay in Houston, and he wrote me a very complimentary letter about an effort to inform the customers about the conditions that they were drilling with.
It's amazing how much these people have appreciated what we have done. They really look forward to this, and they really feel honored by being inducted into the Fluids Hall of Fame. It is a big deal.
I called the AADE staff. I said, somebody told me that I have been inducted in the Hall of Fame. So after struggling, I finally found his number, called him back, and he assured me it is not a joke. You are truly inducted.
The honor of becoming a Hall of Fame member is tremendous, because I did receive a Doc Gray Award in the API, and I have recently received, as part of a team in the training team at Chevron, the Ron Castor Award. So those awards have meant a lot, but this is kind of the culmination of it all, because it's the recognition by your peers that you have made a positive contribution. I was president of the AADE Houston chapter, and I know the work that goes on in that particular effort, and it's just a tremendous experience to have the AADE recognize me for contributions that I have made.
I asked Christine, I said, what would you have me say if I could speak for you? And she said, just tell them that what an honor it is, and to tell the people that she was devoted to her husband and her husband was devoted to her. And then I asked her, what would Jimmy say if he was presented this award? And without hesitation, she said he would say, I don't deserve it, because that's the kind of person he was.
If John was receiving this award today, my best guess is he would have said, I don't deserve this award. He would have given the credit to all the people he had worked with over the years. His family didn't realize what all he had done, actually, and how much he had done. But after they learned about this award, they knew what he had done in the industry, and they were very pleased he was receiving it also.
If he were here today, he didn't want the fame. He, again, I think would be quick to share any achievement with everybody else that was on the team. He spent most of his day in the shop. He kept a small desk down there if somebody needed to check or something like that. He had a little surface to write on, but you'd find him more with grease on his fingernails and crawling around a pump or some kind of casing or something, or one of the vehicles, and trying to improve upon it.
My wife and I met in chemistry class, and I guess the chemistry was good because we've been married 53 years, and we have 2 daughters.
His wife, Christine, would get frustrated with him because he would spend so much time working on his patents and not enough time doing some of the other things that he needed to do. But he did find time to spend time with her. Jimmy was actually a very versatile person. Besides being a wine enthusiast, he was an amateur chef. He loved photography. He took a lot of pictures. He spent a lot of time with his children as they were growing up.
John was very interested in people, and he would write down things on the back of their business cards, like their wife's names, what their interests are, and things like that. And he really liked to follow up with that later on. So the next time he met them, he would say, how's your wife doing, and give the name and so forth. And he'd ask about people's interests and so forth.
I'd ask my wife, did anybody call? And she said, well, yeah, Rig so-and-so called. And I said, well, what do they want? And she said, well, they had problems. And so I said, well, I guess I need to call them back. She said, no, that's okay, we took care of it. I said, what did you do? She said, well, I just told them to add 20 sacks of lignosulfonate, circulate for 2 hours, and then call me back.
Fortunately met my grandmother, Vida, very beautiful lady, Vida Tabor. And like a good man, he saw just a wonderful lady, great looks and very intelligent, and married her right away. Fortunately, she took in Earl, so they were off and starting to have some children, my father being the eldest of their kids.
After John retired, I understand he went up to Utah and was operating maybe a family farm or some small piece of property and growing fruit trees. They were pretty happy up there until he got dementia pretty badly and had to move back to Waxahachie near family.
I have one son, David Ali, and he is working for Deloitte Consulting. He is an MBA. And I have a wife, Joanne.
Jim and Christine had a wonderful life together. Christine speaks very fondly of Jim and her life with him and the things that they did together. She also remembers the times that he spent with his family. He has 3 sons and 2 daughters. But his wife, Christine, will say that, much to her dismay, that on the day that he sold Fan Instrument Corporation to Hot Chemical Company, he said his goodbyes on a Friday, cleaned up his office, and on Monday morning he started a new company called Fan Research Corporation.
He was very involved with his church also, had very many honors with the church. He was a member of Church of Christ of Latter-day Saints, typically called the Mormons by some people, and he was a stake leader, bishop, many other activities, both here and in Utah. John had 7 children. He had 6 with his first wife, and then he adopted the youngest daughter of his second wife, Jerry, which she was thrilled about.
But the granddad was very special to me. I learned a lot from his teachings and education. I can't say that I couldn't be any more fortunate than to have had the opportunity to know him personally, and grandmother as well.
So I think the oil and gas industry has tremendous potential. I see it as we've only really started because the easy oil has been found.
Yes, it is an exciting industry, especially with the unconventional coming on the horizon and the deep water completion. 2 challenging environments, where there's a lot of talents, a lot of expertise are required, and it's a very challenging time where we can make a significant contribution. So for young people, if I have to give advice, they have to do two things. First, they have to do soul searching and decide if they want to go in the management of the oil and gas industry or they want to be in the technical side. If they want to be in the technical side, find yourself a niche and try to develop expertise and then be passionate about the technology or the expertise and go for it. And I'm sure rewards are going to be there.
He also emphasized is always take pride in what you do. No matter what you do, doesn't matter, take pride in what you do. Do the best that you can. Make the most contributions in life that you can. If you reach a point where you've been successful, give back.
Once you decide what you would like to do with your life or whatever, just to stick to it, to go forward, to continue with it. Don't give up. Stay with it. Stay the course till the end. Absolutely.
Considering the idea about people entering this industry, I think that they need to recognize that they should always accept a challenge. If I was starting in the industry today, this would be exactly the place that I would want to be. You need to create a network and be sure that you avail yourself of all technical information that's provided. Attend meetings such as the AADE technical meetings, the SPE.
If John was talking to new employees, young new employees, I'm sure he would say something effective: work hard, be diligent, be patient, and follow your gut. Do things that are right.
That he always said, the first thing you do is you need to ask somebody, what the heck is that? And after they tell you what it is, well, what's it for? And then he'd always sit there and say, and the most important thing is, okay, now how do you improve upon what you just saw?